All right, folks, we're looking forward to having a very special guest back on the show. I've lost track of how many times we've had Andy on, but he has to be a regular on this show because he brings us a wealth of knowledge, not just on the precious metals space, but the current events, the financial markets, and what we like to talk about, taking advantage of the greatest transfer of wealth in world history. Now, speaking of this transfer of wealth, gold and silver are up today. Just been on quite a run since last time we spoke. Andy, how are you doing over there?
Zach, it's good to see you, brother. I just wanted to, before we start, first of all, thank you for having me back, man. You know I appreciate it. It's always nice to see you, whether it be in person in Vancouver or at XRP Las Vegas, where I plan on returning this year, or here. And I wanted to give you a shout out of congratulations, first and foremost. I've been doing this for a very long time, 35 years this month. And a lot of people have made claims and stuck their reputation out on ideas and beliefs. And just wanted to give you congratulations. Not only are you very articulate and steadfast in your beliefs and have made a very convincing argument, but it turned out to be right. And I just wanted to give you congratulations and props. And I'm sure everyone watching this would like to do the same thing. So you have my respect. And just wanted to get that out of the way. And of course, it's always an honor to come back on with you, man. So thanks for having me.
Well, it definitely means a lot coming from someone like you, Andy. For those who don't know, over 30 years of serving up the precious metals and one of the best to do it. It's an absolute pleasure to be working with you, Andy. And everybody we'll have his stuff linked up down below. Andy, can you just explain your business and how well it's doing these days?
I've been running a precious metals business now since 1989. It's been a very interesting run. The last several years have really been, I don't even know how to explain it. The Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. The last 4 or 5 years have been so interesting, it's insane. And it's what's been happening lately is unlike anything, Zach, that I've ever seen in my career. I know we'll get into that a little bit. What I'm getting at is that during the pandemic, the retail industry was on fire, premiums through the roof, and demand um, from all different levels of investors was off the charts. Over the last, let's say, 7, 8 months, we've seen really a change. Uh, Business has cooled down considerably from the average person. We're still doing great business, and people who are uh, tied into the information um, are certainly interested in accumulating precious metals and alternative assets like XRP, like Bitcoin, like whatever. But the general public has shifted into the risk on category, Nvidia, Bitcoin, Apple, these kinds of things. And then you add into it the Trump euphoria. After living the way that we all did for 4 years, wondering what the hell was happening to the country we grew up in, where a guy like me who's come from nothing and nowhere, who found success in athletics and in business by outworking people, not the smartest, never was the best athlete, but I reached success in both areas by hard work, a meritocracy, if you will. All of that was thrown out the window over the last 4 years, along with things that made this country special, our immigration system. All of our relatives, to some degree, came from somewhere else. The electoral system, the judicial system, the lawlessness in the cities, all of these things, which I was very vocal about, um, were awful. And to see a change, I think is wonderful, of course, under the new administration. But it's also, I think, somewhat irrational in response to the fiscal and monetary problems that we face. And so, as the public has somewhat been misdirected, in my mind, into a risk on trade, the most interesting thing that I see right now is the most well informed, and I'll highlight well informed and well funded traders on the globe largely the central banks, the sovereign wealth funds, and the commercial banks, have been on a tear, not only accumulating record amounts of gold around the world, but also repatriating their gold from the typical epicenters, such as the New York Federal Reserve, which would give direct access to the COMEX, and the Bank of England, which gives direct access to the LBMA. Over 45 countries have brought their gold home from these establishments, suggesting a bigger shift is underway. And I would like to talk later on here, I'm sure we will, about what is happening right now on COMEX and the LBMA. It's unlike anything I have ever seen. So I guess what I'm really trying to get at here is that business has been amazing for the last 4.5 years, and it's still decent, better than decent. But what we're seeing right now tells me it's about to get crazy, because what I am seeing at the highest levels in this industry um, is it's either an anomaly or a massive, massive, once in my 35-year career sea change orchestrated by the most well-informed traders on the planet. So I guess I would say, in my belief, it is my belief that we ain't seen nothing yet. And honest to God, I do believe that. And I'd like to explain that as we go along here.
Yeah, yeah, and we're going to get into that. I think I've been describing this opportunity in the digital asset space as the little guy has finally had an opportunity to front run institutions, and that's really not even once in a lifetime, once in a generation. It just never happens. But as it relates to the precious metals run and what you're saying on the higher level, this is something that you guys haven't seen really ever in the precious metal space, other than a couple of times that maybe compare somewhat. But the dynamics here are definitely different. And so we're going to get into that. I want to decode some of this economic data and this economy that they touted as being so strong. And I've been describing this as they handed off the dumpster fire to Trump and this incoming administration, papering it over. And you speak to this, retail kind of being tapped out. And then I would also add retail being distracted by meme coins, by Bitcoin. What's the difference? We'll talk more about that later. And so they've been distracted and tapped out, while smart money and institutions, those in the know, continue to accumulate. I'm going to read off these data points right now on the U.S. household. $18 trillion in household debt. It's a record. Record 12.6 trillion in mortgages. Record 1.7 trillion in auto loans, and nearly a record 1.6 trillion in student loans. Total household debt is now up 55% over the last 10 years, and the total credit card debt is up 50% just since 2020. Meanwhile, delinquency rates on credit cards and auto loans are nearing highs seen in 2008. Consumers have never had more debt. Now, when we got into this, the Fed handed off this economy and they said everything's okay. Don't you worry. The jobs are good. They were reporting strong job growth. Unemployment rate hadn't gone too crazy yet. And so what just came out, though, is that they hid the fact, well, they made the air once again, as they usually do. It was just interesting how big the airs got during the last few years here. 589,000 fewer jobs in the year that ended March of 2024. So they're still revising back to the year that ended in March of 2024, 589,000 less jobs. So between the consumer being tapped out and this fake economy, where does the American economy stand in your eyes, Andy?
Well, look, the information that comes to us from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, should have the L removed from the acronym. It should be the bullshit, is what it's called. And when we talk about, for example, they're responsible for giving us unemployment numbers or employment numbers and inflation numbers. The CPI is ridiculous. John Williams of Shadow Stats will tell us that it's not 3.3% year over year. It's added 8 to that. We're closer to 11 to 12% year over year. The continued massaging and changing, I think they call it hedonics, of the numbers is ridiculous. And they continue to do so. Like, for example, last year, I remember in April, coffee had gone up year over year like 80%. So they took it out and replaced it with something like tea. If steak is too expensive, they'll pull it out and replace it with hamburger. But remember, those kinds of things are on not on the core CPI because food, energy, and housing are stripped from that number. Evidently, we don't need to drive or heat our homes or live anywhere or eat anything. It doesn't take into account taxes, which it should, as taxes have always gone higher. The inflation numbers are fugazi, period, and they're much higher than we are told, and they do that to maintain a inflationary agenda. All governments have chosen inflation over austerity. Ours is no different. So let's hide the inflation numbers. We talk about unemployment numbers. Yeah, I mean, last year they revised pretty damn close to 1 million jobs, and they do it months after the fact, and now they're still taking off another 600,000 nearly. And so the ability to tout these created jobs, which dramatically affect economics and policy decision, only then to have them revised downward quietly. Shh, don't tell anybody. Months and months later, doesn't get noticed. It's a joke. It's ridiculous to miss by that amount.
And how
Um,
many of those jobs were government jobs too? I mean, I don't have the stat in front of me, but it's like nearly
Massive,
half. Yeah.
massive. That's right. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't know the amount of GDP that it comes from government sector is record. It's like 30% or whatnot. And you're right. Massive number of jobs. I mean, 800,000, I want to say they hired last year, hired um, for jobs that now you'll see Doge go by and hopefully get rid of. It's really a joke. Not only that, you had people working 2 and 3 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. There was a lot of these things that were talked about during the year last year, but in essence, I wrote down a few things here. You talk about all of the record amount of debt. That 1.6 trillion in student debt is actually the largest asset of the United States government. Believe it or not. If you Google US government balance sheet, you'll see they have about 5 trillion, of which 1.6, the largest asset, 40+%, is student debt. It is a receivable. You can't bankrupt yourself anymore and get out of it. They'll take your Social Security. That law was passed, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. But the amount of indebtedness is off the charts. That is not emblematic of a strong economy. A strong economy would be one that was identified by savings, investment, and reinvestment, not a copious amount of ever increasing debt. And heaven forbid interest rates begin to move higher, which lo and behold, they are, and especially on the 10-year Treasury, which much of these things, many of these things are factored off of, based off of. So yeah, I think the bottom line is simply this: that the information that comes out of the BLS, whether it be inflation or unemployment, is wrong. It's slanted. Trump inherited a very lousy economy, one that is massively indebted, and that's going to be a problem because if we see things slow down, which I expect to see things slow down, in fact, this is the beginning of what I would say is stagflation, which is little or no economic growth and higher inflation, perhaps higher taxes. And when you have such an edifice of indebtedness that we have, maintaining that debt, servicing that debt becomes very, very difficult, especially as prices go higher and higher and higher on things that people need, the daily necessities. It reminds me of the Cantillon effect, which basically says that the people closest to the money, the wealthy, aren't affected in this respect because their assets that they own go higher and higher and higher and higher. So even in a slowdown economically and even in an inflationary environment, the wealthy are unaffected as their stocks, their real estate, their everything, their assets are enriched in an inflationary environment where the rest of us not only have to suffer through um, misleading and irresponsible reporting by the BLS, which um, that's bad enough, but then to see higher prices and a stagnant economy and job creation really falling off, it's a bad thing, and it's a very bad thing. And I think we haven't even begun to see the end of it. Trump inherited a bad economy, and he's going to get blamed for it by the left. That's the pity of it all. So A little bit more truth in reporting by the BLS would be a good place to start.
Yeah, and to me, it's like the Fed never actually cared about the soft landing. It was like when they said inflation was transitory. It was a lie. They knew it back then. These guys are not that dumb. And to me, it was papered over by the Fed. I mean, the backstop that they came out with too when they purchased treasuries back in August, when the Japan carry trade started to unwind very rapidly, and that was a panic moment where they hit the button, and I think they backstopped with 50 billion in treasuries. And to your point, the Fed has started to cut rates, and now they've plateaued, and now they're hitting the pause. Now that it's the Trump administration, and the bond market has just been calling BS. You say the BLS is BS. Well, the bond market's been calling BS on the Fed. And so the final point that I want to make on the U.S. economy before we go into geopolitics is, like you said, Trump was handed this situation. It's almost inevitable that you're going to see downturn and cuts when the previous administration hired hundreds of thousands of government employees. They're going to get cut right away. That's going to have a downstream effect too. Real estate in DC, we've already seen the average price on Zillow listing has dropped by 100,000. I mean, this is happening rapidly, and the tertiary effects from that, right? And so, are we ever going to see GDP actually flip negative? Who knows? But I would argue, like you made the point there, 30% of that's coming from government spending. That's not real. Plus, how much of these same products and services are just being sold at a higher price? Are we producing more, or are we just charging a higher price? Um, and so basically, it was inevitable that Trump had to rip the Band-Aid off, and what he was handed was pretty ugly. And I think that he knew they were going to blame him. And so I think that he's just ripping the Band-Aid off, hitting it head on. And so my final question to you on the economy here, are we about to see, this economy, the stock market, kind of that big one finally come that we've kind of been waiting for? Do we have a big correction coming up here for the U.S. economy and stock market?
I think we do. And let's look at the bigger picture for a moment. It's all connected, right? The indebtedness and the economy. Um, let's just talk about how indebted we are and watch the policy that the Fed's going to have to make. Let's make it real easy. Let me just do one thing here, and I'm just going to Google one thing as we're talking. What was the 2024 tax revenue
Hmm.
for the USG?
I have a feeling that the 2025 revenue might be a little bit
It's going
lower
to be
than they.
lower because he's going to lower taxes. So it's 4.92 trillion. Let's call it 5 trillion. He wants to lower taxes. So the United States government right now has over 28 trillion in US government bonds that are maturing in 3 years by 2028. So you're taking 15 trillion in 3 years. You owe 28 in bonds that are coming due. That doesn't take into account the indebtedness we have right now, the tax cuts that Trump wants to make, and the fact that we've already spent over 800 billion or created another 800 billion in debt, and it's only February. So you're talking about how do you service 28 trillion in debt with 15 trillion in tax revenue at best, and that doesn't take into account the amount of deficit spending we're having right now. So inflation's going nowhere. That has to be created somehow at a period of time when most of the world is shunning U.S. treasuries. There's a problem right there. And
Right.
then as far as the economy is concerned, yeah, I think it's smoke and mirrors. I think that this is when you look at at the stock market, let's just talk big picture. You have insiders selling at a 6-to-1 clip to buying. So the insiders are selling, not buying. That's ominous. And the big ones are too. Jamie Dimon is reported to be selling 1 million shares at JP Morgan. You have Bezos and Zuckerberg and all of these big players selling, right? Well, they're profit taking. Okay, fine. Or is it bigger than that? Do they know where we're heading? You look at every metric that used to be applied both for are we in a recession, and it would check yes, and both is the stock market massively overvalued by every metric? Yes, it is. So to me, yes, it's long overdue. And then when you realize you have literally the entire stock market being held up by 7 stocks, it becomes that much more ominous. If you look at the Russell 2000 or the Wilshire 5000, I believe it is, that you have you have the broader index or the broader sampling of the economy in those stocks, all the small caps and whatnot. Most of them are underwater, which is what the economy really is. So, yeah, I think that anyone who has ridden this market up the way that they have should understand that profit's not a four-letter word. They would be far better off to take some of that profit off the table and move it into things like XRP, precious metals, things that have, um, let's call them other assets other than the index or the stock market that has ridden things up to record levels and just are primed for a correction. So it's easy for me to say, yeah, we should have a correction, but by every metric, we should have a correction. And I think that that's long overdue. So yeah, taking some of that profit off the table, if you are one of the lucky few who's been invested in Nvidia, who's ridden, Bitcoin way up, who's invested in Apple or any of these stocks that have done incredible, or even the case of Bitcoin that's done incredible.
Mhm.
You look at Bitcoin and it's very financialized. And if the stock market comes down, do not expect Bitcoin to stay immune from that. With the ETFs and microstrategies, they're all part of the same ecosystem now. So yeah, I think that that's something that not enough people are focusing on. And I would say absolutely. I'm not saying get rid of your positions, but I would say pare down some profit. Right now, the insiders seem to be moving in the other direction.
Yeah, yeah, very rapidly too, and very low key about it. Like you said, I was laughing. I made a couple points now on Zuckerberg. He was giving off this persona. He was showing up to the UFC fights looking like a cool guy blending in. Meanwhile, he was cashing out billions of Meta stock, and he was building himself a bunker. So these guys are building bunkers and cashing out billions while they try to show up to the UFC event and act like everything's just a-okay and let's fit in like a cool kid.
Well,
So I
the
think
one
that
thing that the guys at the top have is information. And that's the thing that should be understood. I mean, guy like that doesn't need to cash out. He's wealthy enough unless he's concerned about it.
right,
Um, so, I think that that should be something people pay attention to. And it's hard when you get this dopamine rush of continued profits. It's very hard to do these kinds of things, but it's never been more important to understand that, we're kind of, not only is Trump fighting the deep state, who's going to push back, obviously, but we've ridden this up to extreme highs. And when the insiders who have the knowledge and the information are selling, people should take notice of that.
yeah. Yeah, and just a couple points on that before we get into some geopolitics. What is your take on Doge, Elon, sifting through the government, everything that they're finding? It's been quite a show to watch. The ones that have been kicking and screaming the most, it seems like they have the most to hide with all of this fraud and corruption that's being exposed.
I mean, I'll admit it's slightly odd to see Elon sitting in the Oval Office with his kid jumping all over him. It's odd. But
Yeah,
you know what? God bless Trump for doing it. Honestly, it's really shocking. It's embarrassing. It's disgusting. Um, I don't even know how to explain it. When you see that $280 million was given to the Clinton Foundation to go to Haiti, and 3 million ended up at Chelsea's wedding, and 10 million in her mansion. When you see these organizations across the globe that are being given billions and billions of dollars of our hard-earned tax dollars when people are struggling to make ends meet, and we're giving money for a transgender opera in Jordan or wherever the hell we're doing it around the world. It's just unbelievable to me. The lack of oversight, the lack of accountability, the holier than thou attitude, um, the throwing of stones by these awful people who then turn around and rob the public blind. I mean, are we supposed to believe that Paul Pelosi will go down as the most legendary investor in the world? All of this stuff, these people should be hung in the town square by their ankles until the blood rushes to their head for a long time because, um, it's, and we haven't begun to see yet. I mean, when he
yeah,
audits the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, the Department of Education, and all of these institutions, and the Treasury Department, people were receiving Social Security benefits that were 300 years old, older than the country, for
Right.
God's sakes.
Yeah.
The next year is the 250th anniversary of the United States, and there were people that were receiving benefits that were supposedly like 312 years old. It's just a joke. So yeah, I applaud it, and it needs to be done. And the maybe the grossest part of all of it is the pushback from these people who are bitching about it. They should all be fired immediately. Like, if you could fire a representative, they ought to be, because who the hell are you representing?
Yeah.
Do you really think Elon Musk cares about people's social security numbers or any of that information within the Treasury Department or the IRS that they want to audit? No, these people are screaming because they know not only is their gravy train ending, but there could be something far more sinister that is found out about them. I don't understand how the American public can stand by and let these people um, bitch and complain about something like discovering and unearthing horrendous fraud that is being stolen from each and every one of us little by little.
Yeah. And guys, this is why I love speaking with Andy, because not only is he on top of it with the current events in our markets, but he's also a passionate American like myself too. And it just reminded me, Andy, that up in Vancouver, I felt like we had the hop in our step. And especially in your speech, you gave a couple great presentations up there. And I felt like you, out of everybody there, really brought the fire. Like, you could tell who the Americans were in the room, which was me and you and a couple others, because we had the hop in our step. And I'm trying to tell my Canadian friends up there, don't worry, we come in peace. We're holding Trump. Hopefully we can do some good deals and work together. And it
I
was
know
like,
why that is, Zach. I
yeah,
can tell you, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
look, you ran a lawn business. You were a
Mm,
self-made guy who did it on your own, comes from nothing. My family comes from nothing. Miles Franklin, my dad's middle name is Miles, and his best friend, middle name was Franklin, who 35 and a half years ago lent us $60,000 to start a company in a closet the size of an office. I mean, an office the size of a closet before the internet in Minneapolis, on a wing and a prayer. Come from nothing. Literally, my parents sold their life insurance policies to add a little more money to the endeavor, but it was a shot, a swing in the dark. And you come from nothing, I come from nothing. And this country, thank God that we were both born in it, gave us opportunities
yeah.
to get to where we are. And I am a patriot, and I am the American dream success story, as are you.
Mhm.
And the opportunities that we were given. That's why I rallied so, as a guy that owns a gold company, I was more pissed off about what I saw around me, and this is more of it with the left. Look, my parents were hippies, Zach. I'm all about lifestyle. I was a jock who went a different direction, but grew up in a house that, in the 70s, that right out of a movie, like the stuff that I saw. And I didn't care what drugs you did or what your sexual preference was or who you hung out with. You can still be my friend. Doesn't mean I need to participate or celebrate what you're doing. So I'm okay with lifestyle. I am.
Mhm.
But the stuff that we saw over the last 4 years, to me, if the current administration or the previous administration had retained and Kamala won, I mean, I don't even know how I would feel about being an American at that point. We had gone so far away from everything that was important to me. Um, and I think that's why we had a fire in our step, is that, we've scraped and we've pushed and we did the best we could to get to where we are. And then to see these things taken away from us, where, your hard work and effort was usurped by lifestyle and the fraud and the name calling. And I don't know, man. It's just nice to not only see the things that we talk about, gold at all-time highs, XRP exploding, but it's also nice to see a change back to the ideals that allowed you and I to be successful, allowed you and I to get to where we were, through hard work and effort and staying out of trouble. So I don't mean to get on a soapbox. I really don't. But that the fire is part of achieving success through hard work and being around long enough to do it. So that's why I wanted to, congratulate you, because it hits home with me. someone who comes from nothing, works hard, has a vision and implements it and then gets to it. It ain't easy to do what you're doing, to do daily podcasts, daily videos, to educate people, to put yourself out there. It ain't easy. And you have my respect. And that's why I think you and I and our community has a little bit of fire in our step, a little bit of zing,
Hmm.
because it's just, I guess enough is enough already. And all right, I'll move on, but just wanted to say it that way.
Well, I feel the same exact way 100%. And, it feels like the regular American has a chance again, right? The forgotten man that works every day for his family, the women that run this country, we're coming together once again. And like you said, hard work and merit is now being recognized again. And,
Yeah,
this is the saying that I run with, Andy, is that what I'm here for and what everybody in our community is here for is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness on a level playing field. That's
right.
that's the important part. Pursuit of happiness on a level playing field. And folks don't get it. They're brainwashing the kids in the school to think that capitalism has failed. But we haven't had true free market capitalism. We've had crony capitalism and insiders. And that's part of what Doge is uncovering at the government level. But it extends further than that. This is all being reset. And I think that for many, like myself and you, we know that it's going to be painful. We've never said that this is going to be smooth sailing and an easy one to fix, but we want to go through it. For me, let's rip the band-aid off and let's start to fix these issues. Now we got a lot to cover here still, so let's get into this setup here with the Trump trade war. BRICS. Trump says that BRICS is dead. Um, Clearly, everybody is now being brought to the table with Trump as he's threatening tariffs or actually implementing tariffs. My question to you, Andy, is who is the most vulnerable right now in this tariff trade war?
I mean, ultimately, you could argue it's the United States because, aside from some of the tariffs, like Canada or Mexico, for example, the Trump tariffs that he's threatening on the BRICS nations are not a tariff; they're sanctions, masquerading as tariffs. Tariffs are set up to protect your domestic manufacturing. What manufacturing do we have? So going around the world with a stick and throwing out sanctions masquerading as tariff is not a good thing at all. And these countries, for example, the BRICS, I believe you're not going to hear a lot about the BRICS anymore, or at least for a while, because of what the Bank of International Settlements did to them at the 12th hour last year during the meeting in Kazan. They pulled out of Enbridge at the 12th hour. In other words, Enbridge was designed by China, Hong Kong, Thailand, the United Arab Emirates through the Bank of International Settlements Innovation Hub, and it was operational. And Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil and the head of the New Development Bank, BRICS New Development Bank, said, "Yeah, we've agreed in principle to a new settlement token called the unit. It'll be gold backed, 40% deliverable to central banks upon request, and 60% BRICS plus currencies." They had done test trades for almost a year, several between United Arab Emirates and China using the digital yuan for oil and for gold, operational. And at the 12th hour, the BIS, which is a Western institution, said, this man named Augustus Carstens, whose term is up in June, he said, yeah, the BIS can't be involved with an organization where countries are being sanctioned by the West, so we're pulling out. It's as if he just realized for the very first time that Russia is the R in BRICS after 4 years of helping them develop Chinese technology. In other words, it's almost like they stole the technology and then backed out at the 12th hour. So the BRICS nations change it from Enbridge to Bridge. It's operational. We just saw Indonesia become a full member of the BRICS, the largest in-ground supply of nickel in the world. 25 or so other countries have formally applied, but we're not getting much. Kind of quiet right now on the BRICS front. Yeah, Trump doesn't want it to happen, but it will continue to happen. They will continue to de-dollarize. It will just not be as overt as they were. They really had aspirations of integrating with the Western system, and we're very overt about that, even as far as saying we want to be part of the IMF, the BIS, the WHO, the United Nations, all of it, which I found interesting. And then this happens, and they're going to, I think, be much more tight-lipped on their movements. And quite frankly, there's no reason that the BRICS and the West cannot coexist.
Yeah.
Jerome Powell even said last year, there's room for more than one world reserve currency. Trump saying the BRICS is dead is foolish. I don't believe it to be the case. And if you go around the world threatening countries and continuing to inflate away your currency, um, you are de-incentivizing anyone from wanting to hold our dollars, to hold our treasuries, which you see they've been dumping and replacing with things like gold, which has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury with no counterparty risk over the last 25 years. I think it's us, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because look, the BRICS alone, as they are right now, have a larger swath of human population, a greater percentage of global GDP. They control the majority of all the world's commodities. They have a large stranglehold, if you will, on trade routes, both on sea and on land. They're formidable. Three of the four largest nuclear arsenals. They're not something to take lightly. And yes, I applaud Trump for wanting to, you know, um, talk about American exceptionalism, but you can't threaten countries to take our currency and our treasury when we are the world's largest indebted country on the planet, um, and do so with force. It doesn't work that way. So ultimately, if I had to guess, it would be the United States.
Yeah, and I like that you've touched on this because this is a point that I've made too in regards to BRICS and everybody trying to figure out, what's going to be the BRICS currency. There's many people in the XRP community that thought that XRP could be the solution. And I've made the point that XRP is being used in many of the BRICS nations already, from institutions and banks within those countries. But I've always said, guys, don't wait for the official announcement to come out that BRICS is going to do the deal with XRP. Is BRICS going to back it by gold, back it by a basket? I've just said, guys, what is everybody agreeing on? Even people outside of the BRICS, they're dumping the U.S. dollar, they're dumping our treasuries,
Yep.
and they're going to gold.
Yep.
So if you want a for sure bet, you stack gold, right? If you want a for sure bet, you get exposure outside of the U.S. dollar. Trump being the master of the art of the deal, this is just how he negotiates. So he's
Yes.
coming out of the get with saying BRICS is dead, but it's not going to stop the countries from dropping our treasuries at the fastest pace since the great financial crisis, like China. It's not going to stop them from stacking more gold, repatriating their gold, covering up how much gold they're getting out of the ground too. That's all in motion, whether BRICS happens or not, whether Trump is here or not. What I hope, and I think that you kind of feel the same way too about Trump, we remain hopeful that he just is trying to get everybody to the table now, and we're going to create that level playing field. And we can talk about this with the new system, the tokenization of these commodities, and how this actually implements the level playing field that we're talking about. But before we get there, right now, this has really caused a shock, the tariff trade war, and this is being used as the excuse for why countries are rapidly repatriating their gold back to their countries. What can you give us on this repatriation of gold as someone who's in the business? What are you seeing and what are you hearing in the industry these days?
Yeah. To me, this is the biggest event I've seen in maybe my career in terms of a deviation from anything that we've seen before. And look, first and foremost, gold is the world's only other tier one reserve asset next to US dollars and treasuries. That's important. And this is the reason that we've seen the central banks buy it at the level that we have seen over the last several years and doubling down on it now. But when I tell you that this is so far different than anything I've ever seen, it's 4 feet of snow in my backyard. I live on a golf course in Delray Beach. It's, in July when it's 90 plus degrees. And I have two snowmobiles in Minneapolis in my sister's garage. I wouldn't call her if I woke up this summer with 4 feet of snow on the first tee saying, send them down here. I'm going to use them because I know it's an anomaly. And that's what we're seeing right now. That big of an anomaly. As an example, let's just start at the beginning. Since November. Now, it's interesting that it's since November when Trump won the election. The United States has become a net importer of gold. We've never been a net importer during my career. We've always been a net exporter. And so since November, we've imported almost 13 million ounces of gold. That's reported anyway, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million ounces of silver. That is reported anyway. J.P. Morgan, who I want to talk about in a moment related to the ETFs, is set to deliver for the February contract $4 billion worth of gold. Now, their former trade desk manager, Blythe Masters, she ran the gold desk, said on YouTube several years ago, it's still out there, you can find it easily, that JP Morgan does not buy gold and silver for themselves, that it's bought for customers. Well, who the hell's got $4 billion? Now, I have an idea who I think it is. I think it's the either the Treasury or the Fed, but I'll leave that up to people to decide for themselves. $4 billion, that's one of the largest shipments ever. But to give you an idea just of how different things really are, the February gold contract, which is a 100-ounce contract per unit per contract, saw 59,296 contracts stand for delivery. That is by far the largest delivery in the history of the COMEX market. In June of 2020, during QE Forever, there was a delivery of 47,132, which is the next highest delivery in the history of the COMEX. That's 12,164 contracts at 100 ounces a contract, um, less than the largest delivery ever, which we just saw here in the February contract. This is massive amount. Who's got that kind of money to stand for 5,929,600 ounces of gold? And if you try to multiply that times 2,900 on your calculator on your iPhone, you'll get an E. It's too big. Won't even tell you how much it truly is. And so the importing of gold into this country, becoming a net importer, is insane. Now, something else happened recently. Um, in 2022, well, let's back up. And it's always bothered me that JP Morgan has been allowed to be the custodian of the world's largest silver trust, SLV. And I say that because they paid in 2022 the largest fine the Justice Department had ever given out, and to JP Morgan they did, for manipulating the metals market. And yet they're allowed to be the custodian of the world's largest silver trust. They have recently taken full custody, they and BlackRock, of GLD, also taking it from HSBC Bank. So you now have what I would argue is probably the most significant agent of the federal government in banking, JP Morgan, the custodian of the world's largest silver trust and one of the largest gold stockpiles in the world. In just two vaults that they run in London and in New York, they hold more gold than the majority of the G20 countries. So you have gold rushing back, record deliveries, record deposits. The largest cartel criminal bank, who paid an almost $1 billion fine to the Justice Department, is now controlling SLV and GLD. And I've been asked lots of times by people, do you think gold will be confiscated like Roosevelt did right there? That's the executive order that he used to do it. I say no. In my mind, they'll take the ETFs, which do not allow you and I, if we own any shares, to take possession. Only those that can take a basket, which would be the commercial banks, basically. There, it's tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars worth. And so just recently, as the price of gold has been flying, we have seen 16 tons of gold leave GLD. And another way of saying that is people cashed out their shares. And the CNBC talking heads would say, well, that's people cashing out of GLD because they want to take profits. Gold's gone up, or a strong dollar, or rising interest rates, and they want to reposition into other areas. And that's bullshit. That is not what it is. That's the last thing you would do. Is it's flying up and outperforming up 45% in the last 12 months. That is not what you would do, but it is what JP Morgan would do and the other insiders when they pull out the gold by share redemptions. So they take their shares and they quietly redeem them off the back door, which is not reported like it is if they took delivery off of COMEX. And 16 tons were taken out of GLD. Now that they are running it, it's exactly what it is. It's the insiders repositioning, pulling the metal out. It's removing physical maybe before some potential exposure, who knows? Because you're able to naked short these contracts. And so a lot of the gold that people are talking about, you had mentioned the gentleman who owns Scottsdale Mint, it's all coming from the LBMA. Not all of it. Some's coming from other places, like in Asia and Switzerland. But the gold coming from the LBMA, look, let's use silver as an example because it's more stark than gold. Gold is not quite this leverage, but almost. But in silver, the LBMA has 800 million ounces total in the vault, of which 500 million belong to the ETFs, like SLV, run by JP Morgan. That leaves a float of 300 million ounces. They admit to trading roughly, on average, 290 of the 300 million ounces every single day. However, they also admit to saying that those numbers, 290 million, are understated dramatically, as much as 10 times understated, because they only post the final settlement numbers. So if they're 10 times understated, that means they're trading nearly 3 billion with a B ounces per day, which is 3.5 times the annual global mine supply every day off of a 300 million ounce float. Doesn't work. And so 90+% of all these contracts on the LBMA are paper. They are not the real thing. And their settlement is T+1, which means trade day Monday, +1 settlement Tuesday, Wednesday, give me my metal. Well, guess what they're right now? They're T+8 weeks. Really? How the hell does that happen? Well, we're backed up and there's so much demand. Bullshit. Give me my metal. That is, to me, a default. At the same time, in terms of gold, right now, we're seeing roughly a $25 per ounce spread, which should never be that high, between the London price and the New York price. It's 25 bucks an ounce more in New York than it is in London, because they're trying to get people to take more paper bullshit in London instead of taking the real thing in New York. Now, Trump said this is all because of tariffs. No, it's not because of tariffs. It's way deeper than that. That's the ruse to get it sent back. And it's called, here's a couple of Trump coins that'll make the issue, or I'll explain. Here's a contract in London. Here's a contract in New York. I can take my contract in New York and send it to London and get the metal sent back to me. It's called exchange for physical. They're very fungible. And so they are having contracts in New York, the traders are, whoever's doing it, and they send it to London and then send me the metal. And so that is why you're seeing the London vaults be empty. But to say it's T+8 weeks, in my mind, it is a default. Right. And it gets even deeper than that when you realize a couple of things. Number one, remember, gold is the only tier one asset other than U.S. Treasuries. Number two, we become a net importer. We said that. Number three, the largest deliveries and the largest deposits into COMEX ever. Number four, JP Morgan controlling GLD and SLV and other ETFs. Number five, where is it? Right here. I interviewed the other day this lady. I suggest everyone read the book, Judy Shelton. Judy Shelton used to be, she was Trump's first nominee in 2016 to run the Federal Reserve. And she was not confirmed. With all of the partisan politics, she wasn't confirmed. She's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And her whole premise in the book is that we have lost confidence, the world has lost confidence in our treasury market. And the only way to install confidence would be to, or instill confidence rather, would be to issue treasuries backed by gold, redeemable in gold. And she said to me, Andy, Trump and I have discussed this ad nauseum. And it is her belief that on July 4th, 2026, he will issue 50-year and maybe even shorter duration treasuries collared to gold, backed by gold, redeemable in gold. And I said, Judy, why has Fort Knox not been audited? Now, this was 2 months ago, before all the talk of Fort Knox being audited. And she says, it's unbelievable, Andy. She says, the excuses that are given are pathetic. We're the United States. They tell us that it's too expensive and logistically challenged. She said, baloney. We just spend a few $1,000,000, get it done, it'll get done. Number two, I said, Judy, do you realize that gold on every central bank balance sheet is right now in the United States valued at $42.22 an ounce, and throughout all of Europe at $35 an ounce, the old Bretton Woods price? And I said, do you realize that it is held on every single balance sheet across the globe, central bank balance sheet, in what's called the gold revaluation account? You can't make it up, right? It's called the gold revaluation account. That's what he did in 33 when he confiscated gold. He then devalued the dollar. First of all, this coin that he took from everyone is a $20 gold piece. That was 20 bucks in prior to 1933. He paid everyone $20.54, I think. That 54 cents back then, which now sounds meaningless, was a lot of money back then, relatively speaking. If a dozen eggs are a nickel, you can buy 11 dozen eggs, right? So if you have a lot of these, well, that's significant, right? Well, great. And then he devalued the dollar by 40% and gold went up to $35 an ounce. And so it was confiscating gold, devaluing the dollar, and revaluing gold. When Nixon shut the gold window in 71 at 35 bucks an ounce, the market has revalued it to where it is now at over 2,900. This is not without precedent, but it gets even deeper. So Judy wants to issue 50-year treasuries, and she says, Andy, he's going to do it July 4th, 2026. She will probably lead the Federal Reserve this time when Powell's tenure expires. At the very least, I would expect her to be nominated to the Board of Governors. I guess we'll see. But it gets even deeper when you see Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who admits to gold being his largest holding personally. He wants to, as he just said, monetize the asset side of the U.S. government balance sheet. Well, look at the balance sheet. As we discussed, the largest asset is student debt. The next largest asset is military bases, guns, bullets, airplanes. You can't monetize either of those. I suppose you could monetize the real estate, which is the third largest holding, which would be, put hotels and amusement parks on national parkland or whatever, or lease it or sell it, or revalue gold held in the gold revaluation account. Now that we're net importers, everything's being brought back under the guise of tariffs. That you have their largest cartel criminal bullion bank, JP Morgan, administering the largest stockpile of silver in the world and a massive stockpile of gold. I mean, do you see how these things are unfolding? And what is gold but the only other tier one reserve asset? So I'm not saying that they're going to revalue gold, but I will say this, that every $4,000 increase in the price of gold gives a Treasury General account $1 trillion free and clear. And so, there are people like James Rickards, who was talking $24,000 an ounce gold. He says that by taking M1 and taking 40% of that, and then dividing that into the number of ounces that we're supposedly having at Fort Knox. We'll see if it's all there. And he comes up with that $24,000 number. As crazy as that sounds, that would also add $6 trillion free and clear to the Treasury General account, which now gets our balance sheet in order. And if we then take that revalued gold and peg it to the Treasury market, you have installed confidence. And as Trump, no, what did they say? What did Dilma Rousseff say? Oh, yeah. A new settlement currency, 40% gold backed, redeemable upon request on a distributed ledger technology like Enbridge. Well, what's Elon saying? We need to put everything on the ledger to get rid of the fraud. So you put the gold on the ledger, you put the treasuries on the ledger. And then Judy said to me, and my hope is they issue stable coins backed off of the treasury. So you put those on the ledger for everyone to see. And what did Zoltan Pozar said we are heading into? Bretton Woods 3, a system about transparency in commodities. It's all coming together. And I think there's something much bigger in store, Zach, for gold than just Trump tariffs. Much, much bigger.
And let me help bring this home, just how exciting this is getting, because I'm going to make another connection. And I love Judy Shelton and her work, and this is coming back. I mean, they're talking about Ron Paul coming to audit the Fort Knox too. I mean, this is like a dream, right? We've been praying for this. Ron Paul woke me up back in 2008 to 2012. That's where my awakening began. But we got Judy Shelton saying that we're preparing to launch the 50-year bonds redeemable in gold, right? So you can get the gold delivered to you. And this is coming up on the 250th anniversary that we celebrate next year as a country. Now, this gets even better because one of the main promoters and people in charge of that celebration next year is actually Rosie Rios, who is the 43rd Treasurer of the United States of America. And she actually left to go join the board of directors at Ripple. And she's openly stated, I mean, a Treasurer of the United States, saying that XRP is one of the few digital assets with real world utility. So I tie this all together to say, we got some great things that are about to roll out here in the next, 12 to 24 months. What I worry about is what the enemy is going to be willing to do to stop us from getting there, and how painful it will be, to readjust this, reset this, and revalue it as they describe it on the accounts there. So we have a great opportunity here. And when we look at this gets really interesting. Trump went to the Bitcoin conference, and the Bitcoin bros were just losing their minds and so excited about this. But my takeaway from when he went there was he said stable coins are going to be the key to expanding US dollar dominance, nothing to do with Bitcoin, right? I mean, he said we'd be the leader in crypto. Bitcoin's going to be good. He's touting how well Bitcoin's performed. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this idea of the Bitcoin strategic reserve. Some folks even suggesting that we should sell off our gold to buy Bitcoin. To me, it is asinine. It is ridiculous. How can we store Bitcoin as a reserve when we don't even know who Satoshi is?
Yep.
And so, your idea about the Bitcoin strategic reserve and just how it relates to, like you said, monetizing our assets. What assets do we have, and what assets should be considered as strategic stockpiles in your eyes?
Yeah, well, what happened right after Trump spoke in Tennessee there was Senator Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming got up on stage and said, guess what? We should revalue the gold that's held by the Federal Reserve on behalf of the Treasury, held in the gold revaluation account, to a level sufficient enough to take some of the proceeds to buy the Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and which was quite interesting to me. Trump, in my mind, has never really talked about buying Bitcoin. He's talked about taking the Bitcoin that the U.S. government has largely seized and using that to monetize or to pay off some of the debt. I think that the concept of stable coins is something that we will see more and more and more of. It's interesting too that the majority of the dollar-based stable coins right now, Tether, USDC, and I suppose even the one that Ripple came out with, has a majority of their backing in U.S. Treasuries. And so as people are leaving the legacy system and using stable coins, they're actually supporting the legacy system. I think that CBDCs, the concept of it, has too dark too dark of a potential use case. In fact, I was reading something just the other day where the IRS and the Freedom of Information Act came out, and this Nomi Prince published it. Basically, in studying CBDCs, they said, although we would never do this, you do have the ability, we would, to shut people's money off, to penalize them, to sanction them, to do all of these things. So I think CBDCs would be met with too much pushback. And so they will focus on stable coins. And you could argue that they will control the on ramp and the off ramp the same way. It's a way for them to still have control, to see what's happening, who's doing what, control the on ramp and the off ramp without the pushback of CBDCs. But you're right. These things are changing by the day. What I took away from that conference was Cynthia Loomis wanting to revalue gold to buy Bitcoin. Um, who knows how it all plays out? But look, if they wanted to create some sort of a sovereign wealth fund and have things like cryptocurrency in it, like gold, whatever it may be, in an effort to pay down the debt, great. I'm all for it. I don't know how things play out, but I don't think that we're going to all of a sudden see the United States government, as Michael Saylor is talking about, sell all their gold to end up buying cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. Because if you look, what are all the central banks buying at a level no one has ever seen? It's not Bitcoin. They're buying gold. And gold it has been agreed upon for over 5,000 years to be wealth. And when we compare it to crypto or to Bitcoin, if I were going to make an analogy, gold's 5,000 years old and has been wealth forever through two world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, and everything the world's ever thrown at it. And here we are 5,000 years later, and the central banks, who are the most well-informed traders in the world, are buying it like it's going out of style and repatriating it. And Bitcoin isn't even a teenager yet. It's still a teenager.
Right.
And it's code. So I'm not throwing water on Bitcoin at all. I mean, I own a Bitcoin, one, but I do I just think our camps should be not adversarial, but I do think that it's important to understand that the most well-informed traders on the globe are making a very, very concerted effort to accumulate gold and less so to accumulate Bitcoin. So if Trump were to create a sovereign wealth fund and use the Bitcoin that we have to pay down the debt, great. I don't think it'll be anything more than that. That's just my personal opinion. And I do think you will see stable coins take on a very, very, very significant role. And when Judy Shelton says that it's her belief and hope that stable coins are issued off the 50-year treasury, those are little crumbs that are coming from people who have the information. And I think it's beyond her hope. I think she knows that that is the path.
Yeah, you can't get a better source than somebody who's directly speaking with President Trump. And that's why I love Judy, is because she says, this idea of returning to a gold standard in a digital form, which is what we've talked about, me and you, Andy, is this merging together of two ideas and how well we can work together. The unfortunate part is we've allowed some of these clowns in the crypto space are the ones that are, launching president meme coins and all this stuff, giving us a bad name. We're trying to get them out of the way so that we can get more folks like Ripple and others that are now working with, Ripple's been meeting with President Trump, and President Trump actually just tweeted out on True Social the other day. He actually put out a couple posts about Ripple and their success since Trump has been elected. And like I said, there another stablecoin has been issued, as you mentioned. And so I'm excited about this emergence of the new technology and how it can help precious metals and other commodities become more liquid, efficient, and transportable. And I've always said, once you make gold just as transportable on the DLT technology, why own something that's only been proven for a few years when you can stack something that's been proven for 5,000 years and have it as efficient as any other form of money? And so, Andy, in closing, here's the thing. This conversation of gold backing, BRICS currency, what's going to be the reserve Bitcoin, XRP, etc. For me, as I said in regards to BRICS, you stack gold, right? No matter what they're going to do, what do they agree on? Gold is a tier one asset. What's going to be the biggest stablecoin winner? We don't know yet, but RLUSD is on the XRP ledger. I'll just keep stacking my XRP. Right. So we're stacking what we know is being treated as tier one assets. What we know is a piece of the new rails. And how big of a share is it going to get? What is the revaluation price going to be? Well, that's what makes it so fun. And so in closing, Andy, I just want to get kind of your last words on what people can do right now to protect themselves. Obviously, we're not here to give anybody financial advice, but what are you up to, Andy, as far as preparing yourself and your family for what we're going through?
I mean, I think the best thing people can do is try their best to get out of debt. I mean, that's easier said than done. Um, I think you mitigate your exposure to traditional assets that have had a massive run up, take some profit. I guess these are all very easy, trite things to say. I guess I would say removal of counterparty risk. The Great Taking, David Rogers Webb. People haven't read that or watched it on YouTube. I think they're making a mistake. We're seeing a clear move by the central banks to remove counterparty risk and take possession. They know what's coming. They front run these things. I think you need to be positioned ahead of the coming market dislocations that seem to be moving in this direction. And I guess I'd say that if governments and central banks are hoarding gold the way that they are, what does that tell you about the future of fiat currencies? So I don't know. For me, it would be mitigating exposure to the banking system. I don't think we're out of the woods yet, even by a country mile, in terms of the over leveraging and the undercapitalization of the banks. Mitigate your exposure to the US dollar, where inflation will have to be the path that they choose. Buy assets and keep them in your own possession. That's what the wealthy do. The wealthy, it's not that they have gigantic bank accounts. I'm sure some do, but they have lots of assets. And so pay yourself first. I've been saying forever. For 35 years, when I started the company with my father, he said, you'll buy some gold or some silver every 2 weeks or I'll fire you. And I've owned the company for 2 decades outright. He won't fire me anymore. But that promise has been the greatest gift I've ever been given. To understand the power of compounding and paying yourself first is a massive gift. And let power of compounding work for you instead of against you. So I guess what I'm trying to say in all of this is pay yourself first, do the best you can to stay out of variable rate debt, to pay that off as quickly as possible, even if you have to consolidate it, to buy assets on a regimented basis and pay yourself first, but take possession of it. Have it in your own control. Those are the things that are easiest to do. And then, of course, prepare yourself as if something is coming, a distortion or a disruption rather in the economy. Never a bad idea to prepare like it was a pandemic. Have food and water and supplies, and have some cash and small bills on hand. And these little things that you can do to prepare is never a bad thing, because who knows what tomorrow may bring. Um, I think that's really about all you can do nowadays, Zach. And that's something I've been trying to do now for a very long time. And sometimes you end up with more food in your pantry than you really need, and you end up donating it to a food shelf. Or, sometimes you look and say, well, geez, I've done all of these things, and for what? But that's really what the concept of insurance is. It's preparing, hoping you never need to access it. But in terms of assets, yeah, the only way to get out of the rat race, the only way to get ahead is to continue to pay yourself first, to accumulate assets, to do it regimented every 2 weeks for me for 35 years. And I look at what I've accumulated, and I thank my dad every single day for making me do that. It's the best gift I could give anyone would be to understand the power of compounding. It's like working out. You want to get in really good shape. You don't go to the gym the day after New Year's Eve and on your resolution and work out for 9 hours and say, I'm done. No, you do it every single day, rain or shine, feel good or bad. And you do it for a long time. And you wake up and look in the mirror and say, holy shit, who am I? Well, it's the same thing with anything that we're doing, trying to get ahead. So that's what I would do. Pay yourself first, manage your debt, and continue to buy assets. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's kind of been my secret sauce for a very long time.
It's exactly what I'm looking for. And I've been preaching the same thing for folks to do whatever you can to get liquid, figure out how to get a raise at your job, work OT. Hopefully, maybe OT won't be taxed anymore. We'll see. So, a lot of good things underway, but you're still going to have to wake up every single day, and we're going to have to power through the storm that they're sending our way. We know what the enemy's willing to do to keep their agenda intact. And so, although we have some great things coming, we definitely got to keep our head on a swivel. And the way that we do that, like you said, is removing counterparty risk. So get liquid. And I used to say stack the suppressed assets. XRP's now been set free. Gold is, started to break out, and we could argue that they are still somewhat suppressed as well, but definitely have started to fly since I, first started saying those words. But if you guys are looking to, I know most of our content is focused on crypto, but I've always been preaching the real assets like precious metals as well, prepping as well. And so, like you said, Andy, even if you're just buying a couple ounces every paycheck, right?
Yes.
Stacking what you can and doing it consistently, it's going to compound over time. And one of the reasons why I love having my silver, physical silver, and I got my coins, I got some bars, but what I call it is blackout barter. Folks are worried about the CBDC, the stable coin. Like I said, you don't have to worry about it. You stack gold, you keep it in your possession. You stack silver in your possession, cash out of the banks. We don't need to go all in, but just having an allocation ready to be deployed, whether the lights are on or off, whether the internet is on or off, you can still transact. You still have the ability to make a move. And so I think that that's absolutely critical as we go through these uncertain times. And there is nobody else that I would recommend more so than Miles Franklin, Andy, and his team. So, you guys, if you're looking to stack it, you get in touch with Andy, you tell him that I sent you, and they're going to take care of you better than anybody else in this industry. Anything else that you can say in closing, Andy?
Sorry about that. I hit the mute button. That means a lot to me. Thank you. I take that seriously. The best way for people to get treated special, Miles Franklin, would be to send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Say, Zach sent me. Request our price list that we don't publish. And I have a lot of reasons why I don't, but understand that we will be as good or better than any price in North America. We will work with you. We will answer your questions. Our brokers, I have 13 of them. 11 of the 13 I've known most of my entire life, go back to childhood with them. All of them had successful careers before they came to Miles Franklin, whether it be Wall Street or private equity or degrees from Wharton School of Business, master of business administration from Temple. Very successful guys and gals who came to work with Miles Franklin later in life after they already made their mark. They treat my company as if it were their own, and can answer anything we've talked about here today, expand upon it. They're not order takers. There's no obligation. Just you want the price list, ask for it. We'll send it to you. No one will call you to bother you. If you want to be followed up with, put your phone number and ask to be followed up with. If you have questions, put it down there. Or if you just want the price list, do it. And yeah, we will. We'll make damn sure that your people are treated well, get the best price. And I do appreciate that very, very, very much, Zach. I hope we can do this again real soon. I know I'll see you in May in Las Vegas, but hopefully we can do it again sometime before that, or maybe in person there. And maybe next time I'll have you on my show, as a matter of fact, and you can introduce your thoughts to my community, which is probably not a bad idea also. But it's always an honor to see you. I'm very happy for your success. Wish you continued and look forward to picking up where we left off real soon.
That sounds good, Andy. Everybody, make sure you guys follow Andy. I'm going to link up his Twitter, and we'll link up. Andy's been putting out his podcast too. Great guests. It would be an honor to be featured on your podcast with some of those guests
Consider
you've
it
been.
done.
Yeah. So, Andy, thank you again. It'll be linked up down below, guys. On the way out, could you please like this video, share it out far and wide for us? All of my community resources are available at zachrector.com, but I'm going to link up Andy's sources directly down below. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you guys in the next one. God bless you all. Thank you.
God bless.
I am your host, Zach Rector. I really appreciate all of the love and support. If you want to support the channel, just remember that you can start by smashing that thumbs up for me, sharing this content far and wide, and everything else is at my website.